Section 8 of The Light That Failed. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ellie. The Light That Failed by Rudyard Kipling. Chapter 6, Part 2. Dick staggered away, rubbing his eyes and yawning. In the night watches he was overtaken with an idea, so simple and so luminous that he wondered he had never conceived it before. It was full of craft. He would seek Maisie on a weekday, would suggest an excursion, and would take her by train to Fort Keeling, over the way ground that the two had trodden together 10 years ago. As a general rule, he explained to his chin-lathered reflection in the morning, it isn't safe to cross the old trail twice. Things remind one of things, and the cold wind gets up, and you feel sad. But this is an exception to every rule that ever was. I'll go to Maisie at once. Fortunately, the red-haired girl was out shopping when he arrived, and Maisie in a paint-splattered blouse was warring with her canvas. She was not pleased to see him, for week-day visits were a stretch of the bond, and it needed all his courage to explain his errand. "I know you have been working too hard," he concluded, with an air of authority. "If you do that, you'll break down. You had much better come." "Where?" said Maisie wearily. She had been standing before her easel too long, and was very tired. "Anywhere you please. We'll take a train to-morrow and see where it stops. We'll have lunch somewhere, and I'll bring you back in the evening." "If there's a good working light to-morrow, I'll lose a day." Maisie balanced the heavy white chestnut palette irresolutely. Dick bit back an oath that was hurrying to his lips. He had not yet learned patience with the maiden to whom her work was all in all. "You'll lose ever so many more, dear, if you use every hour of working light. Overwork's only murderous idleness. Don't be unreasonable. I'll call for you to-morrow after breakfast early." "But surely you are going to ask—" "No, I'm not. I want you and nobody else. Besides, she hates me as much as I hate her. She won't care to come. To-morrow, then, and pray that we get sunshine." Dick went away delighted, and by consequence did not work whatever. He strangled a wild desire to order a special train, but bought a great gray kangaroo cloak lined with glossy black marten, and then retired into himself to consider things. "I'm going out for the day to-morrow with Dick," said Maisie to the red-haired girl when the latter returned, tired, from marketing and the Edgware Road. "He deserves it. I shall have the studio floor thoroughly scrubbed while you're away. It's very dirty." Maisie had enjoyed no sort of holiday for months, and looked forward to the little excitement, but not without misgivings. "There's nobody nicer than Dick when he talks sensibly," she thought. "But I'm sure he'll be silly and worry me, and I'm sure I can't tell him anything he'd like to hear. If only he'd be sensible, I should like him so much better." Dick's eyes were full of joy when he made his appearance next morning and saw Maisie, gray ulstered and black velvet hatted, standing in the hallway. Palaces of marble, and not sordid imitation of grained wood, were surely the fittest background for such a divinity. The red-haired girl drew her into the studio for a moment and kissed her hurriedly. Maisie's eyebrows climbed to the top of her forehead. She was altogether unused to these demonstrations. "Mind my hat," she said, hurrying away, and ran down the steps to Dick waiting by the hansom. "Are you quite warm enough? Are you sure you wouldn't like some more breakfast? Put the cloak over your knees." "I'm quite comfy, thanks. Where are we going, Dick?" "Oh, do stop singing like that. People will think we are mad." "Let them think, if the exertion doesn't kill them. They don't know who we are, and I'm sure I don't care who they are. My faith, Maisie, you're looking lovely." Maisie stared directly in front of her and did not reply. The wind of a keen clear winter morning had put color into her cheeks. Overhead the creamy yellow smoke clouds were thinning away one by one against the pale blue sky, and the improvident sparrows broke off from waterspout committees and cab-rank cables to clamor of the coming of spring. "It will be a lovely weather in the country," said Dick. "But where are we going?" "Wait and see." They stopped at Victoria, and Dick sought tickets. For less than half the fraction of an instant it occurred to Maisie, comfortably settled by the waiting-room fire, that it was much more pleasant to send a man to the booking office than to elbow one's own way through the crowd. Dick put her into a Pullman, solely on account of the warmth there, and she regarded the extravagance with grave scandalized eyes as the train moved out into the country. "I wish I knew where we are going," she repeated for the 20th time. The name of a well-remembered station flashed by towards the end of the run, and Maisie was delighted. "Oh, Dick, you villain!" Well, I thought you might like to see the place again. You haven't been here since the old times, have you?" "No, I never cared to see Mrs. Jennett again, and she was all that was ever there." "Not quite. Look out a minute. There's the windmill above the potato fields. They haven't built villas there yet. You remember when I shut you up in it?" "Yes. How she beat you for it. I never told it was you." She guessed. "I jammed a stick under the door and told you that I was burying a mamma alive in the potatoes, and you believed me. You had a trusting nature in those days." They laughed, and leaned to look out, identifying ancient landmarks with many reminiscences. Dick fixed his weather eye on the curve of Maisie's cheek, very near his own, and watched the blood rise under the clear skin. He congratulated himself upon his cunning, and looked that the evening would bring him a great reward. Then the train stopped. They went out to look at the old town with new eyes. First, but from a distance, they regarded the house of Mrs. Jennett. "Suppose she should come out now, what would you do?" said Dick, with a mock terror. "I should make a face." "Show then," said Dick, dropping into the speech of childhood. Maisie made that face in the direction of the mean little villa, and Dick laughed. "This is disgraceful," said Maisie, mimicking Mrs. Jennett's tone. "Maisie, you run in at once, and learn the collect, gospel, and epistle for the next 3 Saturdays. After all I've taught you to, and 3 helps every Sunday at dinner. Dick's always leading you into mischief. If you aren't a gentleman, Dick, you might at least." The sentence ended abruptly. Maisie remembered when it had last been used. "Try to behave like one," said Dick promptly. "Quite right. Now we'll get some lunch and go on to Fort Keeling, unless you'd rather drive there." "We must walk, out of respect of the place. How little changed it all is!" They turned in the direction of the sea, through unaltered streets, and the influence of old things lay upon them. Presently they passed a confectioner's shop, much considered in the days when their joint pocket money amounted to a shilling a week. "Dick, do you have any pennies?" said Maisie, half to herself. "Only 3, and if you think you're going to have 2 of 'em to buy peppermints with, you're wrong. She says peppermints aren't ladylike." Again they laughed, and the color came into Maisie's cheeks as the blood boiled through Dick's heart. After a large lunch they went down to the beach and to Fort Keeling across the vast, wind-bitten land that no builder had thought it worth his while to defile. The winter breeze came in from the sea and sang about their ears. "Maisie," said Dick, "your nose is getting a crude Prussian blue at the tip. I'll raise you as far as you please, for as much as you please." She looked round cautiously, and with a laugh set off, swiftly as the Ulster allowed, till she was out of breath. "We used to run miles," she panted. "It's absurd that we can't run now." "Old age, dear. That it is to get fat and sleek in town. When I wished to pull your hair you generally ran for 3 miles, shrieking at the top of your voice. I ought to know, because those shrieks of yours were meant to call up Mrs. Jennett with a cane and— Dick, I never got you a beating on purpose in my life." "No, of course you never did. Good heavens, look at the sea." "Why, it's the same as ever." Torpenhow had gathered from Mr. Beeton that Dick, properly dressed and shaved, had left the house at 8:30 in the morning with a travelling rug over his arm. The Nilghai rolled in at midday for chess and polite conversation. "It's worse than anything I imagined," said Torpenhow. "Oh, the everlasting Dick, I suppose. You fuss over him like a hen with one chick. Let him run riot. If he thinks it will amuse him. You can whip a young pup of feather, but you can't whip a young man." "It isn't a woman, it's one woman, and it's a girl." "Where's your proof?" "He got up and went out at 8 this morning. Got up in the middle of the night, by Jove, a thing he never does except when he's on service. Even then, remember, we had to kick him out of his blankets before the fight began at El Maghrib. It's disgusting." "It looks odd, but maybe he's decided to buy a horse at last. He might get up for that, mightn't he?" "Buy a blazing wheelbarrow. He'd have told us if there was a horse in the wind. It's a girl." "Don't be certain. Perhaps it's only a married woman." "Dick has some sense of humour, if you haven't. Who gets up in the grey dawn to call on another man's wife? It's a girl." "Let it be a girl, then. She may teach him that there's somebody else in the world besides himself." "She'll spoil his hand. She'll waste his time, and she'll marry him, and ruin his work for ever. He'll be a respectable married man before you can stop him, and he'll never go on the long trail again." "All quite possible, but the earth won't spin the other way when that happens. No, Ho, I'd give something to see Dick. Go wooing with the boys. Don't worry about it. These things can be with Ella, and we can only look on. Get the chessmen." The red-haired girl was lying down in her room, staring at the ceiling. The footsteps of people on the pavement sounded, as they grew indistinct in the distance, like a many times repeated kiss that was all one long kiss. Her hands were by her side, and they opened and shut savagely from time to time. The charwoman in charge of the scrubbing of the studio knocked at her door. "Beg your pardon, miss, but in cleaning a floor there's two, not to say three, kind of soap, which is yaller and mottled and disinfecting. Now, just before I took my pail into the passage, I thought it would be perhaps best as well as if I just came up here and asked what sort of soap you was wishful that I should use on them boards. The yaller soap, miss?" There was nothing in the speech to have caused the paroxysm of fury that drove the red-haired girl into the middle of the room, almost shouting, "Do you suppose care what you use? Any kind will do, any kind." The woman fled, and the red-haired girl looked at her reflection in the glass for an instant, and covered her face with her hands. It was as though she had shouted some shameless secret aloud. End of Section 8. Recording by Ellie, September 2009.